guys. This lecture, I'm gonna talk. It's a crash. Everything all right? I'm gonna talk, and I'm also going to show where you should be on your book. So you guys all have your materials for class. Live TV. All right. First phase of class is setting up motion, right? Changes in position and motion. And we need to understand motion, flexions, extension, abduction, adductions, and allusions to motions, so that we can then take the next step, and that is what is responsible for those motions. What's responsible within our body for those motions. So sometimes you can have motion and it won't be anything inside your body, but majority of the time it is. So it's going to be what influences your own motion, and those are skeletal muscles. So remember, in biology you have 3 types of muscles, and they all have something in common, and they're all a little different in other ways. One is cardiac muscle, which is striated like skeletal but involuntary. So it contracts on its own pace. Then you have your smooth muscles, which have a random striation of the low actin and myosin cilia. They're randomly distributed so that no matter what the length of the vessel is, it's going to have consistent pull force. And skeletal muscles are a little different. Skeletal muscles are voluntary and they're striated, so the little cilia in there, the low actin myosin, their pull force in terms of those components are based on their length. So you don't have consistent pull. You get longer, stronger. You get what Two-Face? What, buddy? So this lecture and the classes about the skeletal stuff, right? There are some skeletal muscles I'm assuming everybody has heard of before. I might use them as examples, bicep, tricep. But specific muscles in terms of their functions is going to be in biomechanics. We're going to look at you've learned about the physiology of muscle pull, and in biomechanics we talk about the mechanical functions of muscle pull. This class is meant to serve as a way for us to truly understand how muscles work, their functions as groups, and how muscles are used to influence your motion. And remember, influencing motion could be preventing motion. Like if I hold my arm out at my side, certain muscles are doing a job. If I hold my arm out on my side, they're doing a job to prevent my arm from falling down. So it doesn't necessarily have to be motion. Another way to look at it is an elevator cable pulling up, right? So if you're going up in the elevator, cable's doing a job bringing you up. Coming down from the elevator, cable's doing a job lowering you down, but that cable could still be doing a job even if there's no motion, right? If you stop on your floor to get off, that cable pulling up lets you get out, and you don't fall down because the cable is preventing you from falling down. So just because we don't necessarily see motion doesn't mean muscles aren't doing a job, okay? So if you recall, let's see, in your commandments, let's see, I'm on page 60. So going to the Commandment Board, all right, let's see. Look at that one, number 7. Whoa, you can't see that. I wish I could flip this around. Oh, well, trust me. Your 7th commandment, muscles can only pull. Super important. And something you're going to have to repeat over and over and over and over and over again. Muscles can only pull. Bones can push, but bones get pulled on. Bones can push, but muscles can only pull. So what I mean by that is if you are pushing on something, right? This is not a muscle. You know, your hand could push on things and your feet could push on things and bones can push on things, but it's muscles that are pulling on the bones. So if you think about a boxer throwing a jab and his knuckles pushing on somebody when it makes contact, push force, it's muscles that are influencing those joints. So bones can push, but the muscles that are influencing joint motion can only pull. Muscles can only pull. Muscles can only pull. Muscles can only pull. Think of a puppeteer, right? So imagine a puppet at a show, and there's strings from the puppet, right? And the puppet master, the puppeteer, is making the puppet move and dance and doing stuff. And all of that motion is influenced by the pulling of strings. You're pulling on the strings and influencing the puppet's motion. So muscles can only pull. Think of it like this. If we have muscles, let me see if I could pull up a decent picture of some skeletal muscles. I'm trying to take into account that I can't flip the camera, so if I flip it, it's going to be inverse, so I need to make sure. Let's see if I can find. There we go. All right, so you've seen these charts before, right? Okay, so you've seen these charts before. And the whole point of me showing you this chart is that you have muscles on the front of you, on the back of you, on the outside of you, on the inside of you. You have muscles covering every part of your body that influence motion. So the point is that if muscles could pull and push, you would only need half of those muscles in your body. In other words, if your muscles can pull and push, you wouldn't need a bicep and a tricep. If your muscles could pull and push, then your bicep could pull you when you need and push you when you need. But that is not how muscles work. Muscles work with tension. Muscles work with pull force. So therefore, we need muscles in every direction that we have motion. It's another way to look at it. We need muscles to pull. We need puppet strings to pull in every direction of motion. So if my neck can bend side to side, I need muscles that pull this way, and I need muscles that pull that way. I need muscles that pull this way and that way. I need muscles that pull this way, and I need muscles that pull that way. And it's not to say those are going to be the muscles that are responsible for those motions. It's just I need to cover all my bases. I need to make sure I have muscles that pull flexion, extension, right lateral, right, left transverse. The shoulder, I need to make sure I have shoulder flexors and shoulder abductors and shoulder internal rotators and shoulder external rotators. So you have muscles that pull in every direction of motion, okay? This lecture today that's just an introduction to what we're going to get to with muscles. But this lecture in particular, let's see, is going to focus on how muscles pull. We're going to get into the hows, and then we're going to develop that concept throughout the coming weeks, okay? So how muscles pull. So if I tell you that muscles only pull, then the next logical step or question, follow-up question would be, how do they pull? What's their mechanism of pull? What contributes to their pull? What is it about it that makes them pull? All kind of similar questions and concepts. So not getting too much into physiology, because I'm not a physiologist, I'm a biomechanist. I'm about the so what. So if you look on the first thing about phase 2 in your workbook, it says how muscles work. And I have a diagram called the Hill's muscle model. And it's a very basic diagram And basically what it does is it breaks down what contributes to muscles pull force into two main categories, but then one of the categories has a subcategory. You have contractile components or active components. These are the actin, the myosin, the myofilaments, the sarcomeres, all that physiology stuff. Basically, the active components pull when they get stimulated. They reply to stimulus. They respond to stimulus. I think that's a better way to look at it. If anybody's ever had a stim machine put to you, the more electricity you give it, the more your muscle contracts. That's how your skeletal muscles are. And you have intrinsic stim machines. You innervate those muscles and you give it more electricity within your body, and the more it responds by contracting. The active components, or the contractile components, are found within the meat of the muscle belly, or the red stuff, okay? And again, they respond to electrical stimulation. With the contractile components, the way they overlap, right? It's like a little cilia, but there's some overlap that goes on to it. But not all of the muscle is, I call it irritability, but not all of it is contractility. Not every structure in the muscle is active or contractile. There's some parts that are inert. One way to maybe look at this is like metal can pass along an electric current, but rubber cannot. Rubber is inert. Meaning that if I have like a rubber band and I zap it with electricity, the rubber band is just going to be like, it won't do anything, right? It won't respond to electrical stimulus. Our muscles have inert properties as well. We have rubber band-like structures in the muscle, and they have elastic properties. They're rubber bands. We have rubber band-like properties of the muscle. And where these rubber bands occur in the muscle is what we call them. In other words, we call them based on their location. If the stretchy stuff is within the muscle belly itself, that means it's running parallel to the contractile component. So if you look in your book, you're going to see parallel elastic components that run parallel to the contractile component. So that is basically the inert stretchy stuff that's within the muscle belly itself. And it doesn't respond to stimulus. In other words, you can't just zap it and it, pull more. It only responds to length. So you think about a rubber band or a TheraBand for you guys that work in clinics. The only way to get a TheraBand or a rubber band to pull more is to lengthen it, to change its length. It responds to length change. And within the elastic components, the stretchy stuff, longer is stronger, right? As you lengthen a TheraBand, it wants to return to its original shape even more. It pulls more, okay? Then you have series elastic. And well, let's go back to parallel side by side. So if you were going to line up in parallel with anything, you'd line up side by side. So like playing a competitive game of Red Rover, you'd line up in parallel. Lining up in series is a little different. Lining up in series is like one after the other after the other. So when you're in elementary school and you lined up to go to lunch, you would line up in series. One person, then the other person, the other person. You'd line up and follow each other. So if you were going to stack dominoes, you would stack them in series to knock them over. So series elastic means one structure followed by another structure followed by another structure. So that is the inert stretchy materials found in tendons, muscle tendons. Muscle belly converts into a tendon, and then the tendon usually pulls on the bones, right? Well, the tendon itself is inert, and it's in series. You usually have tendon, muscle belly, then another tendon. So it's like one after the other after the other. Thing to emphasize here, though, is that even though I said it's kind of this, then that, then this, the actual structures of the inert elastic components, the stretchy stuff, those inner collagen fibers of those tendons, it passes through the muscle belly and out the other end. So it's not like literally the tendon ends and then this new stretchy stuff. It's the same stuff. It's the same material. It's just that when you start getting muscle fiber in it, and then it passes on the other side. An example of same stuff, but location changes its name, is blood plasma and interstitial fluid. Same stuff, but if it's in the blood, it's blood plasma. If it's in the interstitium, it's interstitial fluid. So same thing with elastic properties. If it's in series, the tendon is called series elastic components, but if it's in parallel to the muscle and the muscle belly, it's called parallel elastic. Same stuff, just location, okay? I define all that stuff. Let's see what else I want to make sure you get. All right, so I have this tickle analogy that I use with my son. Oh my gosh, look how young he is. And so the intent is to show you that in the contractile components, right, the active components, the more stimulus to get, the more the muscle is going to respond to pull. And so I give the analogy, a little light tickle, my son responds a little bit more, he responds more, and then I just go all out tickle monster level and he really shortens a lot, okay? Okay, this is a fun one. We are going to define the term contraction right now. This is the next page in your book, okay? I'm just going to speak off the cuff. I want to make sure I have the Word document up here to make sure I follow along so I don't skip anything important. What does it mean for a muscle to contract? Growing up, we've heard things like flex your muscles, right? Well, muscles don't flex, joints flex. Muscles can be responsible for the flexion. Muscles can flex the joints, but the muscles themselves don't flex or extend, or the muscles have the ability to contract. But here's a cool thing. Muscles, I told you the muscles can only pull. Well, guess what? Muscles always pull. Unless you rupture them, muscles always, even when you die, muscles pull. Rigor mortis, right? Muscles always pull. So what does it mean to contract? What does it mean for a muscle to contract? So what I'm going to do now is just tell you a quick story about rest. Are you working at rest? Yeah, your heart's beating and but you have metabolism, you have resting metabolism, okay? So I'm working at rest, but I don't get fatigued when I'm working at rest, right? I can maintain that all day. So the point is that rest for us is a baseline. And we understand that muscles have what they call a resting tone, a resting amount of pull force, a resting amount of work that it does. For us, contraction, a muscle doing a job, a muscle working, I'm going to use those terms interchangeably. This concept has to be when a muscle gets called to do a function, to do a job, above rest, on top of rest. So let's say someone is a bricklayer. Is his body working when he's at home resting? Yeah, it's working when he's sleeping. But we're talking about what is he doing as a bricklayer on top of rest. His muscles doing a job above rest that you can't maintain all day, that eventually you get tired, you got to take a break, you got to pace yourself, or you get exhausted. You know, even if I just held this light baseball, right? I can't hold it forever because my muscles that I'm turning on are working above rest. Above resting tone means that they are being innervated above what they're used to doing, and eventually they're going to get tired because they're not used to doing it. So the analogy that I like to use to explain above rest is blood pressure. And this analogy is in your book, but I love this analogy because it reminds us that blood pressure is on top of atmospheric pressure. So what's atmospheric pressure? 760 millimeters of mercury. But arterial blood pressure, 120 over 80 millimeters of mercury, that's in your arteries. Venous pressure is even less, like maybe 40. And we know through law of mass action that things go from higher concentration to lesser concentration, or higher pressure to lower pressure. So if it's 760 at atmospheric pressure at sea level and 40 in my veins, then if I prick my hand, I should implode. And we know that's silly. And it's not the case. So what gives? That 40 is on top of 760. In other words, 760 is a baseline. It's 760 everywhere. So we're subtracting 760 on everything and just talking about the difference. So 120 over 80 is really like 880, right? Over 820. But we subtract the 760 for everything and we just talk about the difference. And that's how I want you to think about muscle contraction, muscle work, doing a job above rest. When you recruit a certain group of muscles to do a job and you call them, that's what the nerves do, man. The nerves place a phone call. And you have this phone book, this rotary index of different people that you need to do jobs. When your teeth need fixing, you call the dentist. When you sprain your ankle, you call an ortho. When your toilet's broken, you call the plumber. So you know who to call to come do their job. Same thing with the muscles. When you need certain groups of muscles to do a job, you call them, you make a phone call to the nerves, and then you innervate or recruit them above rest to do that job. So that is specifically how we define contraction, is doing a job above rest. When a muscle is contracting, it's doing something above what it's used to doing, whether it's a little or a lot. I personally don't like the term contraction. It's not that I don't like it, it's just that it can sometimes confuse people, because contraction infers or assumes shortening. So you think about a business contracting or a team contracting or anything contracting, and you visualize the act of shortening. But that's not really the case for muscles. Sometimes muscles can be working above rest and not move at all, right? Just like the elevator cable can be doing a job, preventing the elevator from falling down, but it may not be going up, coming down, shortening. It just be staying the same length, but it's still doing an important job. So contraction doesn't mean to shorten. It means trying to shorten. Muscles can only pull. And when something is pulling, that means it is trying to bring 2 points closer together. Muscles, when they are doing a job, are trying to bring those 2 points closer together. Doesn't mean they're going to do it. It just means they are efforting to try to shorten. Okay? So the word I like to substitute from contraction, because as we're going to talk about, you have certain types of work that do shorten those 2 points. And you have certain types of work that don't change the length of those 2 points. And you have certain types of work that allows the lengthening of those 2 points, or the increasing of distance of those 2 points. So contraction can sometimes be misleading. It's not shortening, it's trying to shorten. Those points are trying to come together. Okay? So muscles can only pull. Well, what's in them that's pulling? Active and passive components, elastic properties and active properties, contractile components, and stretchy material, stretchy stuff. Okay. When we talk about a muscle contracting or doing a job above rest, another term I like to use is work. It's more layman's terms, but it takes out the insinuation of shortening. That elevator cable is working when it brings you up. That elevator cable is working when it keeps you there. And that elevator cable is working when it lowers you down. If I substitute working for doing a job, that elevator cable is doing a job when it brings you up. That elevator cable is doing a job when it holds you there. And that elevator cable is doing a job when it lowers you down. It's the same thing with muscles. The same thing with muscles. Those muscles, when you make that phone call to those specific muscles in the body to do a job, they are getting recruited above resting tone to work. You're waking them up, man. Dude, get up. We're about to do this exercise. Or get up. We're doing this exercise. You call them to do a job above whatever resting tone they have. Okay? You think about if something pulls, really there's only three options in terms of outcomes. When you pull on something, let's say you attach a rope to your vehicle and you tie that rope to, I don't know, a door. Let's say you locked your keys in a door. This is ridiculous. And you attach that rope to your vehicle and you attach that rope to a door and you start pulling on that door. What are some things that can happen? The door can come off, the bumper can come off, the rope can snap. In other words, there's options, but nothing could happen. They could have a tug-of-war tie, cancel each other out, just spinning your wheels. The point is that when you pull on something, there's certain outcomes that you tend to expect. Sometimes you don't know what's going to happen, but there's outcomes. And it's the same thing with muscles. When the muscle gets called to do a job, there's one of three things that could possibly happen. You call a muscle to pull above rest, and that muscle is either going to, when it gets the phone call, it's either going to win, lose, or draw. It's either going to cause motion in the direction of its pull. If it's creating motion in the direction of its pull, that means it's bringing 2 points closer together. That means it's shortening while it's trying to shorten above resting tone, meaning it's shortening while it's trying to do its job. Another option could be you observe no length change. The 2 points don't get closer together. They don't get further apart. They stay the same. But the muscle is still efforting. The muscle is still trying to bring those 2 points together. The muscle is still trying to shorten. No changing length, but yet the muscle is still trying to shorten. Remember, contraction means trying to shorten. Shorten while trying to shorten, above rest. No change in length while trying to shorten, above rest. And then the third option is being lengthened. I don't want to say it's lengthening because it's really not. The muscle doesn't lengthen itself. I know it sounds kind of crazy. The muscle allows something outside of it to lengthen it. Think of it like this. Our rubber band analogy, right? Let's think about what the rubber band can do on its own. If I stretch the rubber band and let it go, that rubber band can shorten on its own. It can get shorter on its own. I lengthen it, let it go, it can shorten on its own. But can that rubber band lengthen itself on its own? If I just laid the rubber band on the table and said, hey, rubber band, do something. Hey, rubber band, lengthen. Can't. It can be lengthened and it can shorten, but it has to be lengthened. And it's the same thing with muscles, okay? Muscles can be lengthened while they're still trying to shorten. Think of somebody doing a bungee jump. and they jump off and they fall, and then all of a sudden that cable starts to lengthen, right? But the cable is being lengthened by the momentum of the person falling, right? Gravity is pulling down on them. That bungee cord isn't lengthening itself. It is being lengthened. And then that bungee cord can shorten itself, okay? So muscles can shorten while trying to shorten. They can have no change in length while trying to shorten. And they can be lengthened while trying to shorten. All of those in terms of contraction or work is above rest, remember? So shortening while trying to shorten, above rest. No change in length while trying to shorten, above rest. Being lengthened while trying to shorten, above rest. And those three options. Now, you may say, well, there's some other options. What if you rupture your, I'm talking about normally functioning muscles. There's no problems. Normal functioning muscles, that's one of the three options you can have, okay? And so we give names to those things. We give those types of works names. And again, this is going to be tough because it's going to be flipped. But on this page, working tone contraction types, you guys have heard this before: concentric, eccentric, isometric. Okay. But the key thing here, the important thing here is concentric, isometric, and eccentric, is that all three have something in common. They have something different, but they also have something in common. Mosquito! Oh, gotcha. Did I get you? Might be one of those ninjas. All of them have something in common, and all of them have something not in common. It's all right. My cousins and I have something in common, and we have something that's not in common. So let's talk about what they have in common. I've already told you that. Concentric work, eccentric work, isometric work, they are trying to shorten above resting tone. They are getting recruited above rest to do a job. When a team plays a game, they're trying to win. They may win, they may lose. In some sports, they may tie. But in all three outcomes, they're trying to win. It's another way to look at this. Concentric work, shortening while trying to shorten above rest. Concentric work is the ultimate victory of a muscle because it's doing what it's trying to do, if you think about it. An example with my elevator would be you get on the elevator at the lobby, and it brings you up to the 10th floor to your room. That would be concentric work of the elevator, shortening while trying to shorten, to do a job, to get you from point A to point B. And to get you from point A to point B with something that's pulling that way is to bring those 2 points closer together. Okay? No change in length while trying to shorten above resting tone to do a job. That's when you get to the 10th floor and the doors go open to let you walk out. The doors stay open. Maybe someone's waiting to come in. That cable is still pulling up, doing a job, because if you snipped it, it would fall, right? So in this case, that cable is pulling above rest, doing a job, but there's no shortening or being lengthened. The distances stay the same. Isometric. Iso, same. Metric, length, same length. The hardest one to figure out or to see is the eccentric. And it's because eccentrics can kind of do a couple of things. Eccentrics being lengthened while trying to shorten above resting length. Being lengthened can allow you to start moving, but it can also slow down motion, like putting on the brake, right? So imagine a car is driving down the road and you slam on the brake to stop, right? Well, when you put on the brake and you get slower and slower, you're still moving forward. You're still moving in the same direction you were moving in. So imagine someone's doing a curl and they stop their elbow extension, right? You put on the brake. Well, when you put on the brake to slow down your elbow extension, you're still moving in the direction of extension, slowing down motion. But when you start up here, it wasn't as tough, right? Because you let it speed up, make it stop, let it speed up. So there is some freakiness to eccentrics. We're going to work through that together, and I'm going to teach you how to see that. That's cats, man. Got one of them there June bugs. Good job, cat. So the elevator analogy, I think, works real well, especially in slow and controlled movements where you can kind of, put a dumbbell in your arm and kind of do the elevator analogy. If you hold it here, that would be like the isometric analogy of holding the elevator, letting people get off, letting people come in, making it go up, keeping it up, letting it go down. Concentric, isometric, eccentric. All different types of work. But the key thing is that the muscles are working above resting tone, okay? So I'm going to take it easy on the first lecture. This is our first time. Remember, for you to be counted as having viewed this, you have to comment in the YouTube comments. Make sure you comment with your name, and any feedback you want, that's fine, or you could email me or text me. But the key thing is for this to count for your participation grade, you have to comment that you watched this. Let's see, before Thursday at 10 o'clock. Before Thursday at 10, okay? All right, guys, we're gonna get through this. Later.